She was posted to the far edge of the runway, a silent figure dismissed by her peers and hidden from visiting dignitaries, until one broken war hero stepped off a plane, locked eyes with her, and dropped his cane in stunned disbelief. What he murmured next shattered 3 decades of military silence and triggered a chain of revelations no one on base was prepared for. Who was Lieutenant Nora Quinn, and why had she been erased from every official record, only to resurface now, without aging a day? Before we dive deeper into this haunting and powerful story, tell us where in the world you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow's veteran story will make you believe in second chances. Lieutenant Nora Quinn didn't blink when the orders came. She didn't sigh. She didn't question. She just saluted, turned on her heel, and made her way to the outer edge of Hollis Air Base's runway with the same silent efficiency that had come to define her. Her boots struck the pavement in even, measured rhythm, heel, toe, as if she were counting each step for some internal ledger no one else could read. She passed the checkpoint without so much as a nod to the gate guard. He didn't return one either. After 2 years, everyone knew her in the way people know a lamppost or a caution sign. She was a fixture, not a person. Quiet, predictable, always standing exactly where she was told to, never stepping an inch beyond. They called her Runway Quinn behind her back, said she was some sort of walking clerical error, something that slipped through the system and got assigned to the wrong base but stayed because no one knew what to do with her. A few claimed she wasn't even supposed to be in uniform, that her entire file was half redacted, stamped with codes even command didn't understand. But it was easier to let her stand on the perimeter and fade into the background than to ask uncomfortable questions. Colonel Bruce Halston liked it that way. He stood now on the observation deck overlooking the main staging area, arms crossed, coffee in hand, eyes watching the base move like clockwork beneath him. Logistics officers barked into radios, technicians rushed between hangars, security teams established perimeter rings in advance of the general's arrival. Every screw was tightening, every rotation precise. Except for her. She wasn't a problem, per se. But she wasn't an asset either. She was a placeholder. Something left over from an era Halston didn't belong to. Still, she followed orders. She never complained. She never asked for more. And in a world where problems piled high with every budget cut and staff rotation, one obedient mystery was something he could tolerate. "Keep her out of sight," Halston had said earlier that morning to the logistics chief. "She's good for optics, just not the ones we want." So now, as the sun climbed higher over Hollis, Lieutenant Nora Quinn stood at the edge of the runway like a statue, one foot angled slightly outward, shoulders square, eyes fixed ahead, not scanning, not searching, just waiting. She didn't shift, didn't blink against the sunlight. Her posture was textbook perfect, but it carried no presence. If you glanced too quickly, you'd mistake her for a mannequin. That was part of what unnerved people. 2 junior officers walked by on their way to the mobile command post. One of them, Lieutenant Greg Mercer, nudged the other with his elbow. "He's back in the corner again," he whispered, just loud enough to be heard. The other, Lieutenant Hayes, snorted. "Man, it's like she doesn't even breathe." "I heard her files flagged as classified. Not like high security classified, but like we lost the key and threw out the lock classified." "No way." Dead serious. Friend of mine pulled up her digital personnel record. Half the damn thing was black boxes. Even her date of enlistment was listed as restricted access. How the hell does that happen? Hayes shrugged. "Maybe she's one of those deep cover intel plans. You know, the kind that gets brainwashed, wiped, and parked until someone flips the switch again." Mercer gave a theatrical shiver. "Creepy." Behind them, Nora remained motionless. Her ears picked up every word, of course. always did. But her face showed nothing. No twitch of the mouth, no furrowed brow, just the cold calm of a soldier trained too well to respond. Her eyes, however, her eyes occasionally betrayed the smallest flicker. Not now, not yet. She continued watching the airstrip, her gaze fixed on the blank horizon. 3 hours passed. Then 4. Major Rachel Donnelly was the only officer on base who brought her water. "Lieutenant Quinn," Ray said softly as she approached, holding out the bottle. "You've been out here all morning. Take a break." "No need, Major," Nora replied without turning. Her voice was clear, level, and strange in how precisely it struck each syllable, like she was reading lines from a forgotten manual. Ray hesitated, then stepped closer. "Come on, even the drones get swapped out every few hours. Today is important." "Important?" Ray raised an eyebrow. "It's just a ceremony, VIPs shaking hands and pretending they know how engines work." 2 hours, 43 minutes remain," Nora replied. The Major frowned. "Until what?" Nora blinked. For the first time in hours, her eyes moved. She seemed momentarily uncertain, as if she hadn't meant to speak aloud. "Until the ceremony," she corrected. "Until the general arrives." Ray studied her. Nora wasn't just weird. She was calculating something, and not in the usual way. Her uniform was flawless, not a thread out of place. Even her boots seemed polished in a way that almost looked artificial. And behind her left ear, just under the hairline, Ray noticed the faintest shimmer of scar tissue. It caught the light, then pulsed. Soft, blue. Ray blinked. "What is—" A roar cut her off. Overhead, 4 fighter jets streaked by in tight formation, rattling the ground with their thunder. The base's personnel automatically looked skyward, some with pride, others with indifference. Everyone except Nora. She didn't flinch, didn't move her gaze, like she was waiting for something else entirely. On the observation deck, Colonel Halston watched the general's transport plane touch down with a low mechanical hum. The wheels screeched gently against the runway. Everything was on time. He glanced at his watch, then radioed the security unit. "Make sure our mystery girl stays out of the arrival zone. Last thing we need is some clipboard-happy journalist asking about her." Down on the runway's edge, Nora continued her vigil. A breeze moved across the tarmac, tugging lightly at the edges of her uniform. For the first time that day, she allowed her eyes to move, just slightly, to the approaching aircraft. And somewhere behind her eyes, something ancient stirred. A memory? A command? She blinked, then straightened. 2 hours, 39 minutes, still on schedule. The horizon was no longer empty, and neither was she. Lieutenant Greg Mercer leaned back in his chair inside the logistics trailer, a half-eaten protein bar in one hand and a folder in the other. His boots were kicked up on the edge of the desk, and his voice, though casual, carried a note of smug satisfaction. "I told you," he said, waving the folder like a winning lottery ticket. "Our entire service record is a joke. It's like someone took a real personnel file and went at it with a black marker for fun." Across from him, Lieutenant Hayes furrowed his brow, leaning in to see the pages Mercer was flipping through. Most of it was useless. Entry codes, ranks, unit assignments, all redacted. Even the dates were obfuscated. No training records, no commendations, no disciplinary actions, just 3 words that stood out in bold, unredacted type at the top. Quinn. Nora E. Active service confirmed. "That's weird," Hayes muttered. "She doesn't even have a birth date listed." Mercer smirked. "That's because I don't think she has one. Come on. I'm serious, look at this." Her transfer to Hollis Air Base. No origin unit, no orders. Just a one-line directive from someone in D.C. No signature, no chain of command. I ran it through the system. It pings off a non-existent branch tag. Doesn't even match up to any of our classification levels. Hayes whistled. So, what is she then? Black Ops? Or a cover-up, Mercer said. Maybe she screwed up somewhere high up and this was their way of burying her. Stick her in uniform, give her a post nobody cares about, and hope nobody asks questions. He tossed the folder onto the desk and shrugged. Too bad for them. I ask questions. At the far end of the airfield, Nora Quinn didn't need to hear the specifics to know she was being discussed. There was always a certain tone, a slight pause in conversation when she passed, just long enough to indicate discomfort. The way some of the newer enlisted personnel avoided eye contact, not out of disrespect, but out of not knowing what she was. She felt their stares like she felt the pressure shift before a storm. Subtle, instinctual, learned over time. A small vibration moved through the ground beneath her boots as the transport plane's rear ramp lowered. She watched without moving as a line of sharply dressed officers and honor guards formed near the aircraft, preparing to greet the arriving dignitaries. She was still 20 yards off, a distant observer placed deliberately at the fringe. Major Donnelly stood just inside the main operations tent, eyes flicking between two monitors, one tracking vehicle logistics and the other providing a feed from perimeter cameras. "You've seen her file?" she asked quietly. Sergeant Elijah Burns, standing beside her, nodded. "Bits of it," he said. "Years back, before I was transferred here. She was at Langley for a while. Well, at least, someone named Nora Quinn was. Then she vanished from the system for almost a decade." "A decade?" Ray repeated. "Yeah. Then, boom. Pops up again at Hollis. Orders signed off by someone who doesn't exist anymore. You ever heard of Clearance Templar?" She stared at him. "Templar? That's not even a clearance level. That's a code name." "Exactly." Ray turned back to the monitors. On the black and white feed, Nora was just a silhouette, standing at attention, unblinking, almost too still. Ray watched for a long time. "She doesn't act like she's hiding something," she said softly. "No," Burns replied. "She acts like she doesn't know she's supposed to hide." Meanwhile, back on the tarmac, a subtle change in Nora's posture marked the arrival of General Walter Kane. She felt the moment before the vehicle doors opened, heard the clink of his cane before his foot hit the ramp. Her spine stiffened not out of fear or protocol, but something older, something deeper. Kane stepped out with the help of two aides. The retired four-star general was a legend, even in a community that rarely acknowledged its own. Tall, silver-haired, with a presence that quieted any space he entered. He was dressed formally, though his movements had grown heavier with age. The cane wasn't just for effect, it was necessity. He moved slowly, pausing to survey the airstrip and nod at the officers in waiting. Then his eyes drifted to the perimeter. To her, the cane slipped from his fingers and hit the pavement with a loud crack. He took a step forward, as if the world had tilted. His voice came out low, almost inaudible, but it carried in the sudden silence. "No way." His aides turned to steady him. One bent to retrieve the cane. "Sir?" asked the closest aide. Concern breaking through the formality. General Kane ignored them. His eyes never left Nora. She didn't move, didn't salute, didn't acknowledge. And yet, the recognition in his face was unmistakable. Colonel Halston, watching from the deck above, cursed under his breath and grabbed his radio. "Security," he snapped. "Get Lieutenant Quinn off the tarmac, now." But it was too late. Kane was already walking. The stiffness in his limbs was gone. His gait quickened, growing smoother with each step, as if something long buried had suddenly reawakened in him. Officers parted instinctively as he crossed the airstrip, breaking protocol without hesitation. He stopped just short of her, only a few feet away. "You're not supposed to be here," he said. Nora's eyes flicked toward him. It was the first time in 2 years anyone on base had seen her look directly at another person. "I was ordered to stand perimeter," she said. "Who gave you that order?" "Command." "What command?" She blinked. "Unknown." Kane shook his head slowly, disbelief mixing with something like awe or regret. "You shouldn't be active. I am functioning within normal parameters." "You're not supposed to be," he murmured. Behind them, the air buzzed as more security personnel approached, radios crackling. Colonel Halston appeared at the edge of the field, red-faced and barking into his headset. Kane ignored them all. "You remember me?" he asked. Nora tilted her head slightly, a movement like a clock recalibrating. "Yes." He exhaled sharply. "Do you remember what happened?" She hesitated. "Then, negative, memory is fragmented." Kane took a slow breath, steadying himself. "Then God help us." The arriving security team formed a loose arc behind them. Major Donnelly had joined them, staring between Quinn and the general with a dawning awareness that none of this was in any manual. "Sir," Halston barked as he approached, "you shouldn't be interacting with—" Kane turned sharply. "Don't finish that sentence, Colonel." Halston stopped. Kane's voice lowered. "You have no idea who you assigned to stand watch today." "I've got her file, sir." "No," Kane said. "You don't. We both—" Nora hadn't moved. Her eyes returned to the horizon. But something in her stance had changed. A shift invisible to the untrained eye, like the resetting of a long-dormant system. Kane looked at her for a long time. "Stay here," he said at last, "but not alone." Then he turned to Ray. "Major Donnelly, she's yours now." And just like that, the world started turning in a different direction. General Walter Kane had never been late in his life, not in the jungle heat of Cambodia, not on a frozen black site in Norway, and certainly not now. But he had also never dropped his cane in the middle of a military runway, nor stared into the face of someone he'd been told was long dead, and never coming back. Back in the operations tent, Halston slammed the door behind him, nearly toppling the whiteboard with the seating chart for the ceremony. His headset was still buzzing, voices from 3 different command channels all bleeding into one another. He ripped it off and threw it on the table. "What the hell just happened out there?" he barked. "Somebody talk to me." Ray Donnelly stood with her arms crossed, body tense, watching the live drone feed still streaming across the wall mount monitor. The screen showed Nora Quinn back at her post, her figure small and still, like nothing out of the ordinary had occurred. "She didn't move," Ray said. "Not once. Not when the general walked up to her, not when he said her name." "It didn't say her name," Halston snapped. Ray looked over at him, deadpan. "Did you watch his face?" Burns, still near the comms console, finally spoke up. "Sir?" He recognized her. "Recognized her how?" Halston demanded. "You people keep acting like she's some kind of damned ghost." "She might as well be," Ray muttered. Halston's jaw tightened. "We are not blowing up a decades-old VIP event over some loony lieutenant with a weird service file. Lock down that footage. No one sees it, not the press, not DC, no one." "She's already been reassigned," Ray said calmly. Halston turned sharply. "By who?" "By General Kane. He handed her over to me." Halston blinked. "He what?" "Held her to remain under my watch. Then walked away. Nobody questioned it. Not even the security team you sent to remove her." Halston stared, then rubbed his temples. "This is insane." Back on the tarmac, the official ceremony continued as if nothing had happened. The brass band struck up a patriotic medley. Color guards pivoted into position. Rows of chairs filled with visiting officers and base commandants faced the makeshift stage at the heart of the airstrip. Kane sat on the main dais now, hands folded on his cane, his gaze scanning every inch of the base with the slow caution of someone who no longer trusted what he saw. Captain Tyler Ridge, his advance officer and former intel operative, approached from behind, leaning close enough to speak without being overheard. "You all right, sir?" Kane didn't answer at first. Then, in a tone even quieter than Ridge's, "I saw a dead woman standing at the edge of a live runway, and the world didn't stop turning." Ridge kept his face expressionless. "Lieutenant Quinn?" Kane's eyes narrowed. "You knew." "I knew someone was stationed perimeter who didn't belong in any accessible chain of command." King nodded once. "We have to confirm it." "I already put a request into Pentagon Archives. Back channel." "Use Templar tags," Kane said. Ridge stiffened slightly. "Sir, Templar isn't just outdated, it's erased." "Exactly." At the edge of the tarmac, Nora remained in place, but her eyes were no longer vacant. She was tracking things. Subtle things. Timing discrepancies in the drone passes. Irregular intervals in base radio patterns. Shifts in temperature near the comms relay on the west gate. She felt them before she understood them. She didn't know where the awareness came from. It didn't feel like memory. It felt like code waking up. Major Donnelly approached slowly, 2 waters in hand. Nora didn't turn until the Major was within arm's reach. "I'm not here to relieve you," Ray said. "I'm just here because the General put you under my care." "Care is unnecessary," Nora replied. "Probably, but orders are orders." Ray handed her one of the bottles. Nora looked at it, then slowly took it. "Do you remember anything?" Ray asked. "Context?" "From before Hollis." Nora blinked slowly. "No." "Do you remember the General?" "I recognize his facial structure. No associated memory files." "Files?" Ray echoed. Nora looked at her. "That was incorrect phrasing. I'll think it was." For a moment they stood there, an officer and a question, wrapped in human skin. "Tell me what you do remember," Ray said finally. "I remember standing post, I remember schedules, I remember compliance, I remember time in segments." "Do you remember people?" "No." Ray hesitated. "Do you dream?" "Yes." That answer surprised Ray. "What do you see?" Nora turned back toward the runway. Her voice, when she answered, was flat. "At distortion. Concrete. Noise without source. Instructions that loop." Kane's voice spoke beside them before Ray could respond. "You dream like someone who was left behind." Both women turned. Kane's approach had been silent. He moved like someone who had learned the cost of sound. Nora blinked. "I remember you." Kane's face tightened. "I remember your voice," she added. Kane nodded slowly. "I gave you your final directive," he said. "I was there the day you were buried." Ray's eyes shot to him. "Buried?" "Metaphorically," Kane said. "No, sir," Nora replied. "Literally. Underground." Kane looked at her with something like grief. "You weren't supposed to wake up." "Yet I did." Silence fell. Behind them, the band struck up another song, loud, proud, American. But the air around the three of them remained frozen in a reality separate from flags and brass and protocol. Ray looked at the General. "Sir, I need to understand. What is she?" "She was a soldier," Kane said softly. "A volunteer. We didn't think she'd survive the procedure. Then she did. Then we didn't know what to do with her." Nora tilted her head. "What procedure?" Kane looked at her with tired eyes. "They told me you died after the second augmentation failed, that your vitals collapsed. They told me the prototype was destroyed, that your name was retired with honors." Nora said nothing. Kane stepped forward. "You shouldn't have survived, Lieutenant. We shut down Project Vigilance because of you." "Project Vigilance," Ray repeated. "What was it?" Kane stared at Nora. She was Vigilance? Behind them, the sky rumbled as the next squadron of jets flew overhead in formation. But the air between them remained heavy. Kane leaned in, lowering his voice. They kept you. Someone kept you. And now you're online again. But if that's true, then someone knew this day would come. He looked back toward the base structures, his voice turning to a whisper. Someone out there still has the key. A storm gathered quietly over Hollis Air Base, the kind that rolled low and slow, with thunder that grumbled like an old man remembering things he wished he hadn't. The clouds hadn't burst yet, but the pressure had changed, and everyone on base felt it. Airmen glanced toward the sky with narrowed eyes. Officers checked schedules with more urgency. Communications lagged half a second longer than usual, and no one could say why. Inside a secure command annex near the operations center, Major Ray Donnelly stood alone at a workstation terminal, fingers paused above the keys. The access point she'd found wasn't part of the standard personnel system. It was older, obsolete by most standards, but still alive in the dusty corners of the network. Someone had buried it under layers of redirect chains and fake error flags. It had taken her almost 2 hours to find. She hadn't asked permission. She hadn't told Halston. What she was doing was enough to end her career. She tapped in her credentials. Access denied. She tried again, this time with a bypass encryption pulled from a defunct NATO cybersecurity playbook. The screen flickered once, then again, and then the page blinked open. One name, one file, one designation. LT. Nora E. Quinn, Vigilance, Unit 6, status, retired, /burial, code 12 gray. Ray sat down slowly. Burial code? She scrolled down, heart thudding with a sick mix of anticipation and dread. The document was strange, clinical, but fragmented, as if someone had tried to delete it mid-turn. Sections were labeled like chapters. Phase 1 acquisition, Phase 2 neural adaptation, Phase 3 biopersistence testing. Ray opened one of the attachments. An old image populated. A black and white still frame of a woman in a medical chair, bound with leads and sensors across her temples, her face slack, almost empty. It was Nora, but younger, and she looked disconnected. And in the corner of the image, date. June 4, 1994. Ray blinked. That was 31 years ago. She closed the image. The next attachment refused to open. It was locked with something far above Ray's clearance, the header labeled K9 only. She reached for her phone. Halfway through the message to General Kane's advance officer, she stopped. Her thumb hovered above the send button. Then she deleted it. Outside, thunder cracked once, long and low. In the main hangar, Sergeant Elijah Burns stood alone, wiping grease from his hands as he stared down at something that absolutely shouldn't have existed. He'd been tasked with routine weapons rack checks when he found it, wedged behind the sealed storage locker wrapped in old fabric and dust. A field patch. Black background. Red triangle. Inside the triangle, an all-seeing eye surrounded by 6 stars. It wasn't any current unit insignia. It wasn't even vintage. It was Smith. He'd heard whispers from other postings, rumors of a black unit so off-book that even their failures were classified. But no one ever had proof. Now in his hands, he held it. He turned it over. Inside the seam, printed in faded lettering, NQ, Unit 6. He tucked it into his pocket, his pulse high. Outside the hangar, movement caught his eye. Nora? She walked alone now. No escort, no orders being shouted, no ceremony to distract. The afternoon had quieted. The guests had been ushered into the reception buildings. The general had retreated to a secured conference space, and Nora was simply walking the perimeter. Burns followed her at a distance, silent as a shadow. She paused near the old hangar, the one that hadn't been used in over a decade. Its doors were chained and padlocked, but the locks were old. The paint on the warning signs had peeled. The security cameras mounted above had long since stopped rotating. She placed her hand on the metal and turned to face Burns. "You're not cleared to follow me," she said. "I didn't know I was," he replied honestly. She didn't respond. Instead, she tilted her head slightly. "You have something that belongs to me." Burns hesitated, then reached into his pocket and held out the patch. Nora took it without comment, examining it like one might a mirror. "I saw you once," Burns said. "Before Hollis, at Langley." She looked up. "You escorted a diplomat during a blackout drill. Only the drill turned real. You stopped a breach, but after that nobody could find your name in the deployment list." "I don't remember," she said. "I do." She looked at the patch again, then handed it back to him. "You should keep it." She went, "Because when the system tries to erase me again, I'll need someone who remembers." Burns nodded slowly. "Do you think they'll try?" They already have. Twice." She turned from him then and walked back toward the center compound. Inside the secure wing of the base, Kane stood facing a wall-sized monitor that glowed with a soft blue light. Captain Ridge stood beside him, arms folded, eyes narrowed. "That's her," Kane said. The footage played on repeat. Quinn standing at attention during a night test in 1995, unmoving as a building exploded 50 meters behind her. She didn't flinch. Just watched the fire roll across the sky like it was routine. "Medical scans from that day," Ridge said, pulling up a second file. "Vitals stable, no elevated heart rate, no stress markers." She wasn't scared, Kane muttered. "Because they trained it out of her. Or worse, replaced it with something else." Ridge nodded. "Do you want me to contact the old Oversight Council?" Kane's eyes narrowed. They were disbanded for a reason. Contacting them now would be like poking a bear that's already chewing its own leg off. "So what do we do?" Kane leaned heavily on his cane. "We let her remember on her own." "What if she does?" Kane looked out the window, watching the clouds darken. "Then someone else will remember her first, and they won't be as kind." Outside, Ray caught up with Nora near the generator compound. "You lied about your memory," she said. "No," Nora replied. "I said it was fragmented." "What do you remember now?" Nora stopped walking. "There was a room with no windows. There was a doctor who never blinked. There was a man who read my vitals like they were weather reports. And there was a voice." "And my voice?" "Yours," Nora thought. But she didn't say it. Instead, she turned to Ray, expression neutral. "You called me alive. That was unexpected. I meant it. I wasn't designed to be." Ray shook her head. "You're not a design. You're a person. People die." "And you didn't," Ray said. "That's the whole point, isn't it?" Nora looked up at the sky. The storm had arrived. A low rumble cracked overhead. Wind carried dust across the pavement. The air smelled like static and endings. "We're out of time," she said softly. "For what?" "I don't know yet," Nora whispered. "But I think something's waking up." Night bled into the base like ink on paper, swallowing the hard outlines of buildings and machines. Hollis Air Base, normally alive with motion, had grown still. The last of the visiting dignitaries had departed under escort. The ceremony was over. Flags were folded. The air smelled of ozone and tired metal, a lingering echo of the storm that had passed through just hours before. But not everything had settled. Something had been disturbed, shaken loose. In the security substation behind the eastern barracks, Sergeant Elijah Burns sat alone at a steel desk, his hands pressed flat on the table. The patch Nora had returned to him lay just in front of him, and despite every instinct honed from years of training, he couldn't bring himself to look away from it. He'd seen classified gear, handled sensitive intel, but nothing about this patch belonged to the normal channels. No record in the Department of the Army's Heraldry Index, no mention in any unit history. The insignia, the eye, the triangle, the stars, meant nothing to the military's vast lexicon, except that it did. Somewhere deep in the system, beneath denials and deletions, it had to mean something. Burns reached over to the terminal, tapping in a maintenance login. He shouldn't have access, but no one had updated the credentials in over 4 years. In less than 30 seconds, he was inside a secure archive mirror, an old database copy from a time before certain programs were erased. He typed in one phrase, Shadow Protocol. One result. Document marked obsolete. Do not archive. He clicked. The screen filled with schematics, neural overlays, skeletal reinforcements, cranial chip implants with heat-dispersing microthread. It looked like science fiction, the kind of thing you'd expect in DARPA's private playgrounds, not sitting dormant on a military logistics server. At the center of it all was a name. A designation, really. Subject 6, Vigilance Operative, Quinn, N.E. The notes were chilling in their detachment. Subject demonstrates elevated resilience to thermal stress, electromagnetic interference, and invasive telemetry. Neural framework responds to embedded instruction protocols. Memory can be fragmented on command. Emotion suppression successful. Identity stability unknown. Then Dela in red. Program terminated. Subject deceased. Initiate burial code 12 gray. Burns leaned back slowly. Burial code again. Someone had buried her, but not in the ground. Across the base, in the command annex's secondary server room, Ray Donnelly stood watching a portable screen while General Kane sat beside her, arms folded, jaw clenched. Ridge hovered behind them, expression unreadable. They'd found the video an hour ago, hidden deep in a cold stash archive with corrupted timestamp metadata, only accessible by triple authentication. Kane had used his old credentials that should have been scrubbed long ago. The screen flickered and a grainy recording began. A dark room. A long table. 6 people seated in shadow. And Nora. She sat across from them, posture identical to how she stood now. Upright, rigid, hands folded on her lap. A woman's voice echoed, flat and deliberate. Vigilance, Operative 6, state your designation. Nora's voice, younger but still eerily even, replied, Lieutenant Nora E. Quinn, Phase 3 candidate. What is your operational directive? To monitor, obey, and adapt. Do you recognize the name Kane? A flicker, barely perceptible. Yes. Define relationship. Primary handler, terminated after debrief 17. Kane flinched beside Ray. Ray turned to him. You were her handler. I was her commander, he muttered. I didn't know what they were turning her into. I thought we were building a contingency, a deterrent, not a ghost. The video continued. Do you retain memories of field deployment, Red Lake? No. What do you remember? Instructions. Emergency protocols. A list of names. The woman's voice paused. Do you understand what you are? Nora blinked once. I am functional. The video cut. Kane let out a long breath, shoulders sagging. She was never meant to be awake this long, he said. Whatever they embedded, whatever instructions they left inside her, it was supposed to shut down years ago. Ray's mind raced. So why didn't it? I don't know, but it means one of two things. Either someone kept her alive deliberately, or something triggered her reactivation. Ridge stepped forward. "Sir, I just pulled a new satellite sync from DC Command. There's been a recent spike in pings from old Templar relay nodes." Kane looked up. "Where?" "Here, at Hollis." Ray stood up. "They're watching her." "No," Kane said. "They're testing her." Back near the airstrip, Nora stood beneath the floodlights, staring up at a decommissioned comms tower. Her arms were at her sides. She didn't move. But inside her, something had begun shifting. Her fingers twitched. Data fragments floated up through her consciousness, unbidden, out of order. A voice whispering, "You are not yours." A flash of Kane's face, blood on his uniform. A hallway that ended in fire. The name, Ridge, tagged as a threat, then tagged again as neutral. She blinked, and her vision stuttered. For half a second she saw overlays, code running like a digital HUD, measuring angles, analyzing threats, calculating distances to exit points. Then it vanished. She turned toward the hangar. Burns was already there, waiting. "I need your help," she said. "Yep. Finding the key." Burns frowned. "What key?" "I don't know. But someone left it for me. Someone who knew I'd wake up." She stepped closer, voice lowering. "They're going to try to shut me down again?" Burns held her gaze. "Not if I can help it." Ray arrived moments later, breath sharp from jogging. "Nora, we found your footage," she said. "The real stuff from before." Nora tilted her head. "Is it bad?" "Nah, it's human." "You were a soldier? They turned you into something else, but you didn't disappear." "Not really. Feel like I'm pieces." "You're still here," Ray said. "That counts for something." A light blinked red in the distance, an old radar relay station near the forested western edge of the base. It hadn't been used in 15 years. Nora turned slowly, eyes narrowing. "That's where the key is," she said quietly. Kane and Ridge joined them seconds later. "Whatever's out there," Kane said, "you don't go alone." "I wasn't planning to," Nora said. Ray stood beside her, arms crossed. "I'm coming too." Kane gave a slight nod. "Then it's time," he said. "Let's find out what they buried with you." Together, the 5 of them moved toward the darkened edge of Hollis, the forgotten part of the base, where time had frayed the corners of concrete and wire. The air felt heavier there, older, like memory had taken root beneath the ground itself. Whatever waited for them out there wasn't just the truth. It was a reckoning. The forgotten edge of Hollis Air Base had the smell of rust and wet dust. Trees had started reclaiming the fencing, and vines slithered up the concrete like they were trying to erase man's presence, inch by inch. The radar station stood half-collapsed at the far end of an access road that hadn't seen a convoy in over a decade. The paint had peeled. The dish on the tower was angled wrong, frozen in place. Birds nested in its arms like it had always belonged to them. Nora Quinn stood at the threshold with Ray, Kane, Ridge, and Burns behind her. She didn't speak. She just stared at the structure as if the angles themselves were familiar. Her eyes moved, not in the way a human scans a scene, but like something calculating data points, depth, degradation, temperature, entry points. Somewhere deep in her mind, a subroutine hummed to life. This was the place. Not just a hunch, a confirmation. "This is where I ended," she said, softly. Kane stepped forward, the crunch of gravel loud in the stillness. "You were brought here after Red Lake. They couldn't stabilize your neural interface. I signed the burial code myself." "You signed my death." "No," Kane said quietly. "I signed your peace." Nora didn't answer. Her hand reached out and touched the wall near the service entrance. The metal was cool, vibrating ever so slightly under her fingers. She pressed harder. Something clicked. Ray's breath caught. A section of the wall hissed and receded. sliding inward then pivoting aside like an ancient vault. A green light glowed beyond the doorway, the sterile hue of old tech still running on backup power. The air that escaped smelled of chemicals and cold steel. Nora walked in without hesitation. The others followed. Inside, the walls were lined with panels, some blinking faintly, others cracked open, exposing wire and fiber optics long since severed. A single corridor led downward, sloped, until it opened into a room that looked more lab than military. The center of the space was dominated by an observation chair, reinforced, restrained, designed to hold someone who might not stay willingly. Burns stepped around it cautiously. This place is still drawing power. Stand by mode, Rich muttered. They never really shut it down. Nora walked to the center. Her fingers grazed the restraint locks on the chair and her eyes closed. For a brief moment, her breathing changed. Slower, deeper. A memory surfaced. Panic, cold metal, voices arguing behind glass. Her own screams muted in her throat by some chemical fog. She opened her eyes. I remembered the first shutdown. Kane came to her side. You resisted it. I didn't want to be erased. You weren't. I swear to you, I didn't let them erase you. She looked at him, not with anger, but with something worse. Comprehension. You let them put me to sleep. Kane didn't answer. The overhead lights flickered. A terminal in the corner of the room chirped, then buzzed to life. Text streamed across the display in bursts of green. Vigilance Operative 6 detected. REA's activity protocol incomplete. Error, code fragmented. Running restore sequence. Burns pointed at the screen. Is this supposed to happen? Ridge moved toward it, typing rapidly. It's not external. The system recognized her the second she stepped in. Kane turned to Nora. You need to sit in the chair. Remember what happens if I do? This time is different. You're not alone. Nora's body twitched, a shiver, subtle and sharp. Her pupils dilated. A pulse ran under her skin, visible at the base of her neck, faintly glowing blue. It's already starting, she whispered. What is? Ray asked. The collapse. She staggered slightly, catching herself on the chair. Her systems are trying to reintegrate with outdated code, Rich said. She's fighting between what she was and what she became. We can't let her fracture, Kane said. Get her in. Ray helped Nora into the seat. Her fingers clenched the armrests as the cuffs activated, securing her limbs, not with force, but with presence. They sensed her and responded. I can feel the directives trying to reboot, Nora said through clenched teeth. Orders from voices I don't remember. Focus on your voice, Ray told her. You're here now, with us. You're not their machine. The screen flared. Memory partition found. Extraction initiated. Nora screamed. It wasn't pain. It wasn't fear. It was pressure. Data, long dormant, crashing back into her consciousness like floodwater. Mission log 77, completed. Operation Red Lake, failure. Target designation, Ridge. T. Compromised. Bridge blinked. Wait, what? The system continued. Error, handler conflict. KIN code, authorization overwritten. Altern handler logged rigs. T. Kane's head snapped around. You overrode my command chain? Bridge stepped back. No, that's impossible. I didn't have access to Vigilance protocol. Then how did your ID end up in her memory as her handler? The lights dimmed. Nora's breathing grew ragged, responding to. I know what happened, she said, her voice like broken glass. They gave you control of me after Kane stood down. You were supposed to retire me, but you didn't. Ridge shook his head violently. I didn't. This has to be a systems error. You moved me, Nora said. From Red Lake to Hollis. You buried me in routine. You turned me into a file so no one would ask what I was. Ray stared at him. Why? Because she wasn't supposed to be awake, Ridge exploded. Do you know what she is? She's not just enhanced. She's bonded. A synthetic organic hybrid connected to defense infrastructure that hasn't been used in 30 years. Use a person, Ray shot back. She's a fail-safe, Ridge barked. She was built for one thing, to activate when all other systems failed, to eliminate threats internal to the command structure. That includes generals, that includes presidents, that includes us. Silence fell like a guillotine. Nora slowly stood, the restraints releasing, as if they never held her at all. Her posture was different now, controlled, alert. Her voice was level. I was never the threat. You were. Ridge reached for his sidearm, but Kane was faster. His cane cracked across Ridge's wrist, and the weapon clattered to the floor. Ridge stared at Nora. She's active, he whispered. She's awake. You don't know what that means. Ancient. I know exactly what it means, Kane said. Nora stepped forward. No more protocols, she said. No more chains. The screen behind her blinked one last message. Patient's directive, self-determination, aid or statement. Awake. She looked around the room, at Kane, at Ray, at Burns. Now, she said quietly, I remember everything. And for the first time she smiled. The sun broke over Hollis Air Base like it had every morning before, but this time something was different. The light felt warmer, the breeze carried less weight, and the air no longer hummed with the static of secrets waiting to surface. For the first time in over 3 decades, Lieutenant Nora Quinn stood on the tarmac, not as a silhouette forgotten by time, not as a ghost in uniform, but as herself. She watched the golden light crawl across the runway, warming the concrete beneath her boots. The wind brushed against her cheek like a memory returning home. No more directives whispered through wires in her bones, no more synthetic loops governing her thoughts. She was whole. I think it's okay, she said. Loose. Major Ray Donnelly stepped out of the admin building, coffee in one hand, a small folder in the other. Her expression was softer now. Tired, yes, but unburdened. The previous night had seen the arrest of Captain Ridge, escorted off base in restraints. Escorted not by security, but by a federal task force that arrived within the hour, once the data dump from the old radar station went live. Ridge's override codes, command manipulation, and reactivation triggers had all been verified. He wasn't a handler. He was a saboteur, part of a leftover cabal trying to revive black programs that should have died with the Cold War. Kane had made the call himself. He'd stood before the federal agents and said clearly and without hesitation, I failed her once. I won't fail her again. And now, as the base stirred to life under the gentle dawn, Ray approached Nora with the quiet smile of someone who had walked through fire and found someone else waiting on the other side. You didn't report to formation, Ray said. Nora looked at her, then nodded at the horizon. I was already awake. Ray held up the folder. They're declassifying you. Nora's brow furrowed. Your records, everything. Your past missions, your identity, your deployment history. Soon they'll be public. You won't be a secret anymore. Nora blinked once. And what am I supposed to do with that? Live, Ray said. That's the next step, living. They stood in silence for a long moment. The sound of a jet engine purred softly in the distance, and somewhere near the mess hall, laughter broke out from a group of young cadets. It struck Nora as strange how something so simple could feel so alien and beautiful at once. You ever wonder, Nora asked, why they kept me here instead of scrapping me? Ray considered that for a moment. I think someone hoped you'd find your way back. I don't remember who I used to be. Nora said. You remember how to protect people. You remember the sky. Maybe that's enough. Behind them, General Kane approached with a slow gait, Kane tapping gently with each step. His eyes were clear this morning, more than they had been in years. His shoulders seemed straighter, as if laying down the weight of truth had added years to his life. I got a call from Washington, he said without greeting. They want you reassigned. Nora looked at him but said nothing. Not back into the shadows, he clarified. Nothing covert. They want you in public service, a liaison position, Homeland Security or veteran integration. It's ceremonial mostly, but you'd wear the uniform for real this time. I wore it before, she said. You wore the shell, he replied. Now you'd wear the name. Nora turned back to the runway, the horizon wide and open in front of her. Would they listen to someone like me? They'd have to, Kane said, because now the country knows your name, and what they did, and what you survived. A long pause. Then Nora nodded slowly. I'm not angry, she said. I thought I would be. Kane exhaled. You have every right to be, but I'm just ready. For what? To belong somewhere. Burns joined them then, stepping up quietly as he often did. He held a duffel bag over one shoulder and wore civilian clothes. He looked at Nora, then offered a small salute. They're giving me early release, he said. Going home. Nora tilted her head. Where's home? Still figuring that out, he said, grinning. Thought I'd take the scenic route. She smiled, genuinely this time. Let me know if you find it. He paused, then held out a small black patch, her old insignia, the one with the red triangle and the eye. I kept it. Figured it belonged to history. But maybe it belongs to you. She took it, staring at it for a long beat. Then she folded it and placed it in her breast pocket. I'm not that anymore, she said. I know, Burns said. That's why I wanted you to have it. He left without another word, disappearing into the early light like a man finally free. Kane turned to Nora. You'll get questions, reporters, politicians, people who don't understand what it meant to be you. I'll answer them, she said. Not for them. For the others. The ones they buried with me. Ray stepped forward. So? What do you want now? Nora looked at them both. I want a sunrise without a mission. A walk without perimeter. A morning without protocol. I want my life back, even if I never had it before. Kane smiled. Then go take it. Later that day, as the base gates opened and a convoy of civilian vehicles entered for transition ceremonies, Nora stood at the edge of the assembly field, uniform crisp, boots clean, nameplate restored. She shook hands. She answered questions. But when the flag rose, she didn't salute out of programming. She did it because it felt right. Behind her, a new generation of airmen watched. Some of them had heard the stories already, others would learn later. About the woman who guarded the tarmac in silence. About the general who dropped his cane and said, "No way." About the system that tried to erase her and failed. And about how she stood, not as a machine or weapon, but as a veteran who remembered what the sky looked like when she wasn't following orders, but following hope. That night, as the last ceremony ended and the base settled under the weightless dark of peace, Nora walked the perimeter once more. Not because she had to, but because it was her choice. She passed the hangar, she passed the old relay tower, she passed the forgotten places where ghosts used to live. And when she reached the end of the runway, she looked up. The stars were sharp, unblinking, and for the first time since she could remember, so was she.